The 7 late-night shows teamed up to fight climate change. Jimmy Kimmel said, "You can't escape. It's basically an intervention. The pandemic, systemic racism, income inequality, immigration, gun violence. But here's the thing. If we don't address climate change, none of those issues will matter at all. Wildfires, floods, landslides, which all amazing things to hear Stevie Nicks sing about. Not something you want to experience in life. More jokes in a second. But this was the brainchild of longtime late-night writer and producer Steve Badeau of The Daily Show. Each current late-night host took a big portion out of their show to tackle the red-hot climate crisis in signature style. Seth Meyers said climate change has made everything weirder. Now it's just normal for friends to show up for dinner in late September looking like they just ran a marathon. Pretty soon, the traditional Thanksgiving feast is going to be replaced by a clothing-optional backyard barbecue. It's too hot for turkey, so we're just doing mashed potato smoothies. This is how bad climate change is getting. Wildfires in the west, floods in the east, freezing cold in Texas. Billy Joel is going to have to write an update for 2021 and call it, "Actually, we did start the fire." Stephen Colbert said, "Americans treat climate science like soccer. We know it's out there and it really matters to the rest of the world, but no one can make us care. Maybe Ted Lasso could, but ordinary people are doing something about climate change. They're worrying, especially young people. A recent study asked youths 16 to 25 from around the world how they felt about climate change, and 56% agreed with the viewpoint that humanity is doomed. Nice try, kids, but you're not getting out of your student loans." Trevor Noah said climate change affects unexpected little things. It slows sea turtle reproduction, dampens the human sex drive, and affects the taste of coffee, wine, and beer. Trevor said a lot of weird little effects that when you add them all together ends up being basically everything. You know, my one hope is that the news finally gets people to take drastic action, because if anything's going to motivate people, it's going to be the end of sex. From Variety, Saturday Night Live has announced their first 4 guest hosts of the season. They are Owen Wilson, Kim Kardashian, Jason Sudeikis, and Rami Malek. Pretty good list. The show will also live stream on Peacock for the first time. Now, since the spring of 2016, NBC has made SNL available live across the U.S. rather than forcing the West Coast people to wait until 11:30 like us East Coast people have to do. Last year, NBC tried testing a global live stream of the show on YouTube when Elon Musk hosted it. This year, you'll be able to watch it on Peacock. We also learned from this article, a 30-second spot on Saturday Night Live this season costs around $180,000. That's up from 2015 when they were getting $89,500. NBC generated approximately $123 million in ad revenue off the program in 2020, compared with $114 million in 2019. Not bad money there, Lorne Michaels. From Rolling Stone, they reran an article with Norm Macdonald. Now, they write, Norm's Netflix series was built to subvert the institution of late-night television. In an era which late-night hosts were expected to be political and their guests to stick to the script, Macdonald chose to go in the opposite direction. He avoided politics completely, and with his joke writing, boiled the talk show down to its purest form, people talking. Yeah, the guests could seem random, from Jane Fonda to Judge Judy to David Letterman. Rolling Stone asked Norm Macdonald what makes a good guest. Norm said, "I was really young, but I remember Carson's first guest was usually a funny person, irrelevant of where he stood in show business, like Buddy Hackett or Pete Barbuti. These very odd choices, because they weren't superstars like all the first guests are now. You tended to have more of that back then. They weren't plugging things. Carson was so good at letting people talk, and he always valued comedians above everybody else." Rolling Stone said, "What makes a good talk show host?" Norm said, "I don't really have it personally. The best was Carson, because it's being able to listen. I'm learning to listen a little bit. Every time people say anything, it reminds me of a story that's like their story. Lori Jo Hoekstra, who produces the show, told me to think of it as a conversation. That helped a great deal, because I said, F it." Rolling Stone was curious. "There's no need for a commercial break on Netflix, so why do you cut to breaks throughout your show?" Norm, "Well, we use the break so the guests can catch their breath. Also, guests are used to a break, so they want that." Then Lori Jo said that people are interested in what actually happens during the break, so we use sections from the break to do that little 15 seconds. That's because everybody asked me, what did Letterman say during breaks? Rolling Stone asked him, what did Letterman say during breaks? Norm answered, nothing. He says nothing at all. The band strikes up really loud and he's surrounded by producers. Sometimes he would wave them off and talk to me, but I think he was so freaked out about having to talk to some actress about her house or something, the producers would want to insulate him from the guest, and they all take off right before he comes back on. I can understand that. In radio, we talk about, like, don't leave it in the hallway. Save it for air. Save it for air. So I guess Letterman doesn't want to talk to guests because you might accidentally have a conversation off air that you want to have on air. Rolling Stone, the breaks give your show an old school broadcasting feel. Norm, that's cool. That's actually a big thing, the broadcasting part, because I always watch Tom Snyder and Firing Line and Merv Griffin on YouTube all the time. I really love those guys. From City Beat, comedian Dave Chappelle is seeking zoning approval to host 4 more shows just outside the village of Yellow Springs. The Board of Zoning Appeals was having a meeting last night to consider it. Zoning Inspector Richard Zoff, ZOPF, told City Beat that the issue is the pavilion is zoned for agricultural and not for commercial use. Zoff said David worked out a way to entertain people during the pandemic. He worked out a way to do that, and the board gave him the exception for that reason. That exception only lasted a year and has expired. Now that bans are lifted in Ohio, the circumstances no longer apply. From LakersNation.com, say it with me, your home for comedy news. Shaquille O'Neal is hosting an event featuring musical and comedic guests. Tickets are officially on sale. The event is called The Event. Shaq said, I'm honored to have many people in the Las Vegas community and beyond join our efforts to help underserved youth. We're proud to create an inclusive event, one that everyone can be part of, blah, blah, blah. The headliners include Justin Bieber, Kelly Clarkson, and Snoop Dogg. No word on who the comedians are. The event takes place October 2nd at the MGM Grand. You got money. Tickets are $125 to $300. Table sponsorships available for $10,000 to $75,000. Yikes. From The Hollywood Reporter, Billy Crystal is returning to Mr. Saturday Night for the stage. That's right, Billy Crystal, who starred and directed in the 1992 film Mr. Saturday Night, will reprise his role. He'll be doing it at the Barrington Stage Company in the Berkshires. With minimal set and costume pieces, Billy Crystal will appear in 9 performances starting October 22nd. Tickets on sale, barringtonstageco.org. From Austin Culture Map, Maria Bamford's at the Moon Tower Comedy Festival 2 nights, 7 p.m. local time. And the Austin Culture Map was like, someone on YouTube called you, Maria Bamford, the jazz music of comedy. What do you think, Maria? If I'm going to take that as a compliment, and I think I should, I think it means it's a small, dying audience. Very specific. You have to go out of your way for it. Not everyone will be into it when you put it on. Maybe 20 years after the death of a jazz comic, there's going to be a lot of talk. They were like, is there a lot of pressure to be open about your personal life? Maria, if I'm amongst the jazz of comedy, not many people are trying to find me. It's that, well, you know, she's at the Albany Funny Bone, but we live 30 miles out. I don't know if we can make it tonight. I totally relate. I mean, despite my love of Journey, have I ever seen Journey in a stadium or anywhere? Have I even looked into seeing Journey live? I have not. Austin Culture Map said, you're a lot of comedians' favorite comedian. Do you have a favorite? Maria, it's usually whoever I've just seen. This is where I feel inspired. They're doing it. To keep doing something, whatever it is, whether parenting your children. High fives to all the parents out there. I do not have children. There's a reason for that. It's amazing. I go to open mics and people are just starting, having far more passion about the craft than I do. It can be very inspiring to see an 18-year-old young man who's high as a kite, but really excited to perform. Today's Daily Comedy News is brought to you by the Art Legends in History podcast. Art Legends in History is a podcast for those curious to learn more about art. The newest episode is out. It's about Pablo Picasso. A Picasso quote, "The world today doesn't make sense, so why should I paint pictures that do?" Throughout his 92 years of life, Pablo Picasso helped shape the progression of modern art through the 20th century. Perhaps more than any other artist, he was a master painter, but he also experimented with sculpture, ceramics, collage, etchings. His innovative work and startling mix of styles have had an unparalleled impact on modern and contemporary art. I was scrolling down the feed. I was checking out the September 13th episode about Banksy. Banksy, the pseudonym used by the well-known UK-based street artist, though his identity still remains a mystery, which is impressive. That's hard to do in the 2020s. Banksy's distinctive style is known by the stenciled graffiti artworks that appear unannounced, typically in public places, often depicting figures integrated into the physical environment and addressing political and social themes. There have been speculations about his identity, yet they remain speculations. So the podcast is called Art Legends in History, artlegends.org, or wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, it is time for John Mulaney gossip. You know you like it. Don't act like you don't. From the Mercury News, they are questioning the timeline. A lot of people questioning the timeline there, John Mulaney. Mercury News said Olivia Munn opened up to people about the excitement she and John Mulaney share about having a baby together, and said that the baby is due, quote, later this year. Today's September 24th. There's not much later this year left. So as the Mercury News says, if Munn and Mulaney's baby is due later this year, say November or even the end of December, the baby's expected arrival date renews questions about John Mulaney's timeline. Think about it. Let's say the baby's born December 31st. Let's back that up 9 months. If I did the math right, that would mean the baby's consummated, say April 1st? Is John Mulaney's timeline accurate? Time will tell. we're going to find out, John Mulaney. A celebrity agent who has worked with Olivia Munn said, I don't think it's any coincidence that John broke the news of Olivia's pregnancy the way he did in terms of basically giving a timeline of his past few months when he moved out of his house, how it was the spring when he fell in love with Olivia. Seems to me that he's going to great lengths to dispute the idea that he cheated. Now from Cheat Sheet, fan theories detect messages about John Mulaney in Ana Marie Tendler's Instagram post. Now yesterday, we looked at Mulaney's comedy. Now let's look at Ana Marie Tendler's Instagram post. One post is producing fan theories about Tendler and similarities to a certain historical figure. Some think she's telling her followers there's much more to her story simply by referencing this famous fallen queen. But one selfie in particular has some sleuths convinced she's confirming rumors without speaking a word. She's wearing a necklace, and history buffs think it's a call to Anne Boleyn, second wife of King Henry VIII and the former Queen of England. Likenesses of Anne Boleyn often portray her wearing a similar necklace with a bee on it. Tendler's caption, the Most Happy, Moosthappi, is also seemingly a reference to the Queen. She used Most Happy as a motto in her marriage to King Henry VIII, according to historians. One observant TikTok user pointed out the caption also references an age-old medal etched with the remnants of Anne Boleyn and the phrase, the Most Happy, spelled like Tendler's caption. Paying attention? You still with me? Notably, King Henry VIII was so smitten with Anne Boleyn at first, he oversaw the formation of the Church of England to secure a divorce from his first wife to marry her. But palace gossip targeted the Queen. She was soon accused of adultery with several men, including her own brother. The king eventually ordered a bunch of beheadings, most importantly, that of his once beloved wife. Cheat Sheet says, these similarities are notable. Are they? Really? Is John Mulaney going to have Ana Marie Tendler beheaded? I don't think so. Not at all. In fact, I'm going to say he's definitely not going to have her beheaded. This is an unfair comparison. Tendler never publicly said that Mulaney left her to produce children with Munn, but she did allude to mothers and children in a Mother's Day post featuring her adorable and beloved French bulldog Petunia. Tendler is finding her own section of fans. Her Instagram followers currently include famous names like Casey Musgraves and Ariana Madix from the Vanderpump Rules. What is even going on this podcast anymore? From the LA Times, Paul F. Tompkins, he's a comedian, no gossip here, was 17 years old when he braved a stage for the first time to make people laugh. It was Philadelphia, July 1986. It was a double act with his friend, but it was still terrifying. Paul said, I remember that people laughed enough to give me the idea I had done well. It felt like it was the beginning of a dream come true. When he recently revisited those early days as the LA Times, digitizing his collection of tape stand-up sets, he said he would cringe. It's not my fault back then that I wasn't as good as I am now, but it was weird that I couldn't see it as an evolution. Paul F. Tompkins is now 53. He's the son of a railroad man and the fifth of 6 children. He moved to LA after 8 years on the stand-up scene in Philly. In LA, he discovered the alt comedy scene where the likes of Janine Garofalo and Bob Odenkirk were doing conversational, avant-garde stand-up in bookstores and coffee shops. Paul said, I was like, oh my God, this is what I wanted to do, but I didn't know how to do it. I still had only the club template to work with, and it was too scary for me to even conceive of just talking like I talk off stage. Seeing those guys was a huge creative watershed for me. Odenkirk and David Cross noticed Paul F. Tompkins in the absurdist sketch troupe The Skates and hired him as a writer on Mr. Show, and the rest is history. And that is your comedy news for today. I feel like today's episode didn't really click. I missed today. I'm sorry. I will try again tomorrow. Tomorrow's a new episode, no weekend filler, real episodes all weekend. And you can follow the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your shows. Don't buy me a coffee today. I didn't earn it today. Do not, whatever you do not go to buymeacoffee.com/dailycomnews and throw $5 in tip jar. Because like I said, I think today wasn't as good. Of the 5 weekday episodes this week, this was the 5th best. We'll try again tomorrow. See you then.